The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. I'm Senator Kevin Avard. I represent District 12, 3 wards here in Nashua, and we're going to be talking with another candidate for CD2, and I'm going to welcome Bob Burns to the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for coming on. So we were talking off camera, there's 7 people running for the same district.
Yeah, 7 in total.
And so you're the 4th.
Well, you have to determine, and I think towards the end, we'll have a debate on WMUR.
I was being funny. So we had interviewed Lynn, Steve, Mr. Belanger, and of course now yourself. And why are you running?
So a lot of different reasons. I've always been interested in politics, and I got my start in city politics, and I did county politics, and I've run for state politics. So federal politics is, it's kind of one of the easiest things to talk about, and I think it's probably where the most subjects that I have the most opinions. But recently, I worked for Donald Trump's campaign. I was on actually his national team as his National Youth Coalition's chair. And I think it's important that we get people in office that are there to support him and his agenda. We see what happens, all the attacks that he gets, and even within his own party, that I think it is important that we get Republican congressmen in there that will be there to support him and his agenda.
I have an opponent on my Democratic side that's running against me. His name is Tom, and his very reason for running is because Trump.
Right.
Whatever. But there's a lot of vitriol, a lot of hatred, a lot of strong feelings against Trump and for Trump.
Right.
But
I think the important thing to remember is when we look at a lot of the reasons the Democrats are running, particularly for the House and the Senate, it's about impeaching him. It's about stopping the agenda. It's about stopping what the American people already voted for, and that was Trump and his agenda.
All right. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background. You were born here in Nashua?
Sure. I was actually born right here in Nashua at St. Joseph's. I later lived in Amherst, New Hampshire, grew up in Bedford, went to Manchester West High School, and then went to college over at Keene State College.
Jeez, you're all over the map here. So I guess you know the district.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny. So I don't currently live in the district, but I always say I'm really the only guy from the district. I used to summer up at Lake Sunapee and Lake Winnipesaukee, which we have one town on Lake Winnipesaukee in the district, Center Harbor.
Center Harbor?
Yeah, Center Harbor.
How does that work?
Yeah, it's crazy because it's the only Belknap town. It's the only Belknap town in my district. Hooksett is the only Merrimack town not in my district. You know what? The state reps and the state senators, they voted on the district. I would probably do it a little bit differently.
Right. I think that's up for changing in a couple of years from
Every
now.
10 years, yeah. After we do the national survey or the national survey.
So why do you feel as though you could beat Rep Kuster?
So I think that I've got some interesting positions, and particularly I have some experience that people that we've run before against Kuster haven't had. I definitely have a lot of ability to reach voters without using a lot of money. That's what I've done in the past. I've almost always run against Chris Pappas for office, and he's always outspent me, 20 to 1. And I've beat him before, and I've come close a few times when he's spent $250,000 or $500,000 against my 10 or 20,000, and I expect to do that again against Kuster. I hope that the money's not going to be so lopsided this time, but I've had a successful run out there. I've got a little name ID and a lot of experience in the state.
So why should the voters not vote for Rep Kuster?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons why. I mean, particularly for Republicans. I mean, the way that she is on guns, and we've seen this district switch before on guns. When Dick Sweat was the congressman, he got elected talking about how he wasn't going to implement any new gun laws. Then he voted for the assault rifle weapons ban, and then we voted him out. And we got Charlie Bass, and Charlie Bass hugely ran on Second Amendment. Kuster has been completely against the Second Amendment. She even, helped stage a sit-in on the House floor to protest guns. So I think that that's an important issue to the people of the district, and I think that that is going to hurt her. Now, I don't expect to get the Bernie Sanders and all the progressive votes out there, although it was funny because I just had a barbecue and a woman showed up. She was a progressive and she said, I'm looking for a candidate that can beat Kuster. Kuster has, a terrible reputation among the progressives in the party. She threw Bernie Sanders under the bus when she supported Hillary Clinton as a superdelegate. She and her friends were the people behind, basically rigging the Democratic primary. And
You think that was rigged?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, did they actually, change the votes at the end of the day? No, but they definitely did a lot of things that really didn't allow Bernie Sanders to have a chance to win. And that's how I would say it's rigged.
And yet they're seeking to impeach the president.
Right, because of the made-up collusion and Trump derangement syndrome and Russian derangement syndrome.
So talk about your platform. What guns? What else?
Sure, Second Amendment. I'm pro-life. I'm a conservative. But
when you say you're pro-life, what do you mean?
I'm 100% pro-life from conception.
Okay. How about in the life of the defense of the mother?
The problem is when we start using, life of the mother, life of the mother absolutely has to mean, and I've talked about this before, and you need a panel to look at it and whatever, not because my life is going to change or psychologically I can't handle that, because this is what they try to put in there. Absolutely, there's a few cases where in fact, it is life or death. A woman comes down with cancer and she can't get chemotherapy without having an abortion or what have you. In those cases, and I believe that we would need a panel in this sort of situation. And we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We haven't totally gained control of the Supreme Court yet. But in those cases, then I would say yes. I mean, you're trading a life for a life. You can't say that you're pro-life, but one life is worth more than the other life.
Okay, so pro-life, guns.
Pro-gun.
The progressives are loving you.
Well, some progressives actually do like guns. There are some progressives from Vermont that, have their AR-15s in their closet at home. And even some, bleeding heart progressives, it's more about, they want, socialism. Not all socialists are pro-choice, but...
Right.
But then, other important parts of my platform are going to be, working on the economy and opioids. Right now, I think opioids is one of the most important issues to people in New Hampshire. We're down here, and it's not just in the cities like Nashua and Manchester, but we're seeing it all over the place, particularly among the Vermont border or Keene. I mean, I first really kind of, experienced or saw people experiencing, heroin addiction when I was a student at Keene State College. That's when I started to hear about, girls in my class that got in trouble for shooting up on their job as a daycare worker. And this particular girl was in the ESAC program, which means she was training to become a teacher. And I was horrified.
What can the feds do?
Okay, so one of the things that we can do is right now there's a national push. Okay, so we just received some money. Some more money to fight opioids. Now, you hear Kuster and you hear other people, it's money, we need more money. Well, the rehabilitation centers are as addicted to the money as the drug addicts are addicted to the drugs, and that's a problem. The other thing, too, is how we're running these drug rehabilitation centers. One thing that we need to be doing more is focusing in on fitness and exercise. Fitness and exercise helps release endorphins inside your brain, which fills up a lot of those same receptors that are craving the heroin, and that's one of the most effective ways to get off of it. Another thing is we got to stop passing the blame. You hear a lot of heroin addicts that come out, or drug addicts, or fentanyl addicts is really what most of these people are now. There's not a lot of heroin left on the streets. It's now this synthetic opioid called fentanyl. You hear a lot of them, they blame a pharmaceutical company or it's somebody else's fault. You go to AA, nobody blames Budweiser for being an alcoholic. They take personal responsibility at AA, but then I see these drug treatment centers and I see these drug addicts, and it's everybody else's fault. It's not their fault. So we need to focus more on personal responsibility. The drug rehabilitation centers, too, need to separate people who truly want to get clean and the people who are just going to pull everybody else down around them. And that might seem heartless, but you can't have people who don't want to get clean mixing in with people who do want to get clean. Because when they fall off the wagon, they're going to pull other people down with them. And that's another thing that's really been hurting them. And, sorry. Go ahead. And lastly, I wanted to talk about is Suboxone. Right now, there's a huge push to allow more doctors to prescribe this drug called Suboxone. Now, what Suboxone is, it's an opioid. It's an opioid that we use to try to get opioid addicts clean. It's kind of like treating alcoholism with beer. So somebody who goes in with extreme DTs or withdrawals, we give them this drug so that they're going to help them get clean. But many drug addicts are now taking this drug, and they're squirreling away a few strips for themselves, but then they're selling it to people who aren't opioid addicts. And it used to be somebody would go to a methadone clinic in the morning. Said bye-bye to my methadone. James Taylor. They would go to the methadone clinic. They would watch you drink the methadone because methadone, of course, is an opioid in and of itself. But now we say, here's 10 strips, here's 20 strips, here's 30 strips. Go off and go to work. And some people will work during the weekdays and party on the weekend with fentanyl. Some people will sell them to, let's say, high school kids who will buy a pharmaceutical opioid because they believe it's safer. It's a lot more expensive. But fentanyl, this synthetic opioid that's coming from places like China and India and Mexico, that's coming from these labs, it's so inexpensive, it's so cheap to get high that they can sell this Suboxone and then just buy the fentanyl. And I'll just leave you with this as I get off of Suboxone. Suboxone now is the most trafficked drug in New Hampshire prisons. Really? So that tells you something. And right now
Where did you get that information from?
The internet. I mean, there was something recent, and it must be the New Hampshire Department of Prisons that must have released it, because they did ban crayons because of the amount of Suboxone that was being smuggled in crayons. Because it doesn't come in a tablet form anymore. It comes in this like strip, like you see the Listerine strips. And so they would wrap the crayons in there, and they were smuggling the Suboxone in crayons.
All right, switching topics.
Sure.
New Hampshire's, we're in session next week, and we're in committee now because of the Wayfair decision. Are you familiar with that?
Is that the tax? Yeah.
And as far as I understand, our federal delegation, including Rep Kuster, they've not come up with a solution for this, and it really needs a congressional solution. We're going to do what we can here in the state to protect the state, but have you given that any thought?
Yeah, sure. And I heard that there was talk that they were going to propose some legislation to exempt states that don't collect taxes, like New Hampshire. So, that's definitely somewhere to go down. I heard a state rep jokingly saying that, well, if we're collecting these taxes, can't we charge an administrative fee, like 99%?
That's tongue in cheek, but it's a serious situation. No. I mean, and basically your brick and mortars are basically, we collect a lot more retail than our counterparts based upon our population. And that's at risk.
All right.
And so that's something definitely to consider. But we haven't heard anything from our federal delegation at all. They're like quiet, and it's troubling to the state, to say the least. So put that on your radar, sure, if anything else. So what else is on your platform? What are you talking to the voters about?
Well, I mean, to talk about my own life experience, so you've got a little bit of my history of politics and where I grew up and stuff, but what I do for a living is I work in manufacturing. I do quality control and automation. So I think the automation part is really the important part to talk about. Mm-hmm. Most of the industries that I work in are pharmaceutical. I do some food, explosives, DOD type stuff as well, but most of what I'm in is pharmaceutical production. And so I work at plants all across North and South America, and we've been losing a ton of manufacturing to places like India. Recently, I just got home from a trade show in Germany, and I saw all these young people everywhere that seem to have just tons of free time and tons of expendable cash. And you know, I looked into it and I said, well, what's their unemployment? And I think their unemployment was around the same of what ours was, or a little lower. And you know, they're making more money than us. So I thought to myself, well, how are they doing it? And so I'm at this big pharmaceutical trade show, and one of the saleswomen that worked for the company that I sell for, you know, she had mentioned that this particular pharmaceutical company was the last one in Europe without automated quality control equipment. And I was like, the last one in Europe without automated quality control equipment. I'm sure that's not exactly true, but if I were to think about it in the United States, I would say about 60 to 70% of my customers don't have automated equipment. And we really do push back against automation here. Now, there's 3 reasons why. Number one, and this is where Congress comes in, federal regulation. The FDA absolutely makes it extremely difficult to implement new technology here, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry. And I've heard that the same thing from people in aeronautics, that you know, you'd think that we were working with all this advanced equipment, but they're really like, you know, years back compared to where the technology is today because of government regulation, government red tape, validation, and implementation.
Isn't Trump cutting through all that?
Well, hopefully he's starting to, and supposedly he has, particularly with Aero. I know he came in and lifted some regulations, some FAA type regulations with that. But no, we haven't done anything at the FDA yet. Absolutely not. He's come in and he's, you know, demanded lower prices, or, you know, we're going to do something about it. But no, nobody's actually done anything to help streamline, bring in new technology here. The second reason that people push against automation here in the United States, the unions. Absolutely, the unions have been a big problem in industry here across the country. I have one facility I'm working with right now that's going to close down for a certain period of time so that they can end their union contracts, and then everybody is hoping that they're going to get their jobs back, you know, in a few months from now, and then so that the company can be sold, because nobody wanted to buy the facility with the current union contracts. And then the third reason, it's just generally like, I don't know, it's American stubbornness to accept new technology. And the irony of that is that a lot of this automation, new technology, and robotics, this is coming from MIT and Cambridge and, you know, down there in Massachusetts and Silicon Valley.
Does that threaten jobs, or does it create jobs?
Well, people say it threatens jobs in the plants where that didn't automate, where I would hear people, you know, routinely complain, oh, that piece of equipment's going to take my job. Well, they don't lose 3 or 4 jobs, they lose the entire plant to India.
Yeah, so I thought we went to Pennsylvania not too long ago, and along the way, we saw a lot of, you know, we stopped at McDonald's with the kids, and they have a lot of automated.
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't know if they have the minimum wage issue going on there, but I suspect that has something to do with the fact, well, you know, we can't afford these employees, so we're going to automate.
Right. It's not even minimum wage. I mean, unemployment is so low because Donald Trump is doing such a great job. You can't find people in fast food right now. I went to a fast food restaurant the other day, and I mean, it was just, you know, it was 10 o'clock at night. It was still open. I think they had to lock their doors because they only had 3 people in there working. They had signs on every table saying that they were hiring at, I think, $11 or $12 an hour for closers. I mean, this was a McDonald's. I mean,
Wow.
That's what they're hiring at McDonald's right now. So you hear about this national push to go to $15 an hour at fast food. It's going there nationally. It's going there naturally. You know, and I know some of the fast food chains out in California, they already pay that level voluntarily. In-N-Out Burger has always been one of the highest paid fast food restaurants out on the West Coast because they look for the best people.
Let's talk energy.
Sure.
What can you do to help us?
Push more nuclear power. I'm serious, though.
All right,
I've never been a fan of the fossil fuels. I absolutely believe that a lot of the fossil fuel companies out there have stifled our technology and implementing and building new nuclear power plants. I think it's terrible what we've done to nuclear power in this country. I spend a lot of time in places like Europe. I see places like France where you see nuclear power plants everywhere. It's clean, it's efficient, it's cheap, and we need more of it.
And our power plant is basically halfway through its life cycle, from what I understand.
Right.
And it would have been nice if we had had 2 towers instead of 1.
Absolutely.
And they do help us with our base load, no doubt. And of course, it is heavily subsidized by the taxpayers at this point. That was a revelation to me. But with regards to the grid, we're part of a grid, and it seems as though we're gold plating the grid. There's another $4.6 billion coming our way to upgrade the grid for reliability. And is that necessary? I mean, and if so, how can we silver plate it?
I'm kind of a jack of all trades, king of none. I kind of know a little bit about everything. I probably don't know as much about energy in the grid. I mean, I definitely know a little bit about nuclear energy. From my growing up with my father, he worked. His first job was on a nuclear submarine, or I guess his first real job. I
hope he didn't take any pictures.
No, not of anything that he wasn't supposed to. I get the joke.
Yeah. Okay, so how's the campaign going?
It's going great. I mean, I'm getting a good reaction from people, particularly when I talk about the automation stuff that I talked with you about today, particularly when I talk about the opioids and the Suboxone stuff, because people aren't really talking about those parts of the issues when I bring them up. I think when people go out and campaign, they say a lot of the same things. They're and whatever the topic of the day is, people like to talk about. But I really truly feel that I am getting a lot of excitement. It's slow out there. It's early in the summer. Because of the way that the news cycle is now, people don't listen to as much local news. The 2nd Congressional District 2 has always been kind of out of the media market a little bit. You've got WMUR and the Union Leader in Manchester, the CD2 papers like the Nashua Telegraph, the Keene Sentinel, the Valley News, et cetera up there. They have kind of much smaller reaches, and then they're more localized to their regions. So, they might talk about the CD2 race a little bit here and there, but, they don't talk about politics as much as the Union Leader, let's say, has typically in the past. So it's, and then also the North Countries, and, we're from the Massachusetts border of Salem and Atkinson. We swoop around, Manchester, and then we go all the way to Coos County, and you're in 3 media markets. You're in a Massachusetts media market, a Vermont media market, and a Maine media market. And so people have trouble focusing in on particularly this district more than one. But even New Hampshire, running across the state of New Hampshire in general is tough to get people to focus. I mean, I remember when I was younger, friends of mine thought Mitt Romney was our governor because they'd see him on TV all the time.
Wow.
So it can be a little bit tough to get the message out there. The internet's been great, and Facebook and Twitter and social media has definitely been a really great avenue for me to connect to new voters, and I do see a lot of excitement out there, and a lot of people are interested in taking on Custer this year.
Are you reaching some of the millennials?
Some of them, yeah, absolutely. I've got a few that work for me, I think he might have said he was under a millennial, and I think I have one millennial that works for me right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to college campuses at all?
Well, the colleges are closed down over the summer.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to one tomorrow. So
are you really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to one on Thursday for, I'm actually going to my alma mater for a kind of a debate/forum, but I don't expect that there's going to be any students there.
So
maybe a few.
I'm going to be talking to some, I guess, reporting students that want to be reporters, and we're going to be talking about media. And
so they must be in some sort of summer class or program.
It has to be, yeah. It'll be up in Franklin Pierce.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And my counterpart will be Molly Kelly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Senator Kelly. So they want both sides. So they're going to get it, but. That'll be interesting. But I know there's some students on campuses, but will you have a plan to reach them come August or September?
I mean, again, it's the social media. And the funny thing with the really younger, and I think the people, I don't remember where millennial cuts off. I think the kids that are turning 18, 19, 20 right now are actually under millennial. I think there's another name for them, and I can't remember what it is now.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, it changes fast.
So you have basically a campaign slogan or sound bites that you put out there?
Well, I mean, one of the things I've talked about is, legislation that will come before me. I'm going to make sure that it's cost-effective, constitutional, and necessary.
Some of the other candidates that I've talked with, basically, they brought up the fact that it seems as though Rep Kuster is kind of out there and not approachable. Are you hearing
Yeah, I've
this?
heard that a lot. I mean, I've even talked to former Congressman Frank Ginta, who served at the same time as her, and he was kind of always amazed how much vacation time that she would take and not come back to New Hampshire and meet with the voters. I fly out of MHT, Manchester Airport, all the time. I remember seeing Hodes there. I'd see Frank Ginta there, run into Kelly Ayotte, whose husband's business was actually right down the street from mine. So
Bill Daly?
Yeah, so yeah, the landscaping business that I've actually run into Kelly and Bill a few times at the local
I
convenience
see her at
stores.
lacrosse tournaments. She goes to lacrosse tournaments with my stepdaughter.
But I would see all of these people. I never see Custer. Never. I've even run into Gene Shaheen and Elizabeth Warren on a plane. Twice. Out of Boston, though. But flying in out of Manchester, flying in out of Boston, I never run into Custer. So I don't know if she ever comes home.
Just a thought, that's something that we're hearing more and more, and you are to represent us, and being approachable is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And being in contact with your voters.
Yeah. So if you're going to make a pitch to the voters here in Nashua, and of course District 12 or whoever this reaches, why don't you look into the camera and say, hey, hi, I'm Bob.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My name's Bob Burns. I'll be Robert Burns on the ballot. I'm running for CD2 so that I can go there and be there to support our president and Donald Trump. I think that I've got a great chance of beating Ann McLean Custer because of my social media savvy, my views that I think are a little bit different, and hit the nail particularly on opioids and manufacturing here. And as far as Republicans go too, I think that I'll benefit Republicans across the state because I'm the only person really at the top of the ticket who is a former Trump guy and can help activate those Trump voters.
And so how do people get in touch with you and find your website?
So my website is burns4nh.com, and you can do that either with a 4 or FOR. Google me, you'll find it. My Facebook page is very easy to find under Bob Burns. So like everything today, you just Google it, and you put in Burns NH. I think I come up first. My uncle Ken out there in Walpole, he's a little under me now, I think, for those searches. Ken Burns is not actually my uncle, but that was a joke.
Ken Burns, I'm thinking that just rings a bell.
He's the documentary.
I know who that is. Yeah,
right.
That rings a bell.
Right.
Actually, every time I do a little video, it says, "Do you want to use the Ken Burns photos?"
Right. So, I get this a lot, particularly now that I'm campaigning out there. People ask me.
Are you taking in volunteers?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and okay, so
You get out there doing signs, doing phone calls.
okay. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I wish you the best, and I can't wait to hear the debates.
Yep. Thank you very much.
All right. Hopefully this has been helpful and for you to get an understanding and a feel for the candidates. If you have any questions and you want to contact them directly, now you know how. And we appreciate you watching the show. And until next week, thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.